Carl always loved the silence of a weekday morning. He was in his late 20s, and living alone gave him the freedom to enjoy whatever pace of life he wanted. On most days, he worked in a downtown office, juggling client demands and project deadlines. Today, however, was special. His boss had offered him the day off in exchange for covering a busy weekend shift a few days prior. Seizing this rare opportunity, Carl decided to spend the entire day at home, taking a well-deserved break. A few years ago, he had begun experimenting with outfits in the privacy of his own space. Slowly, he realized how much he enjoyed wearing softer fabrics, blouses with delicate patterns, and skirts that flowed around his legs. He had once hesitantly bought a light floral blouse and a black skirt that ended just above the knee, and ever since then, that simple ensemble had become his favorite. In private moments, he would even do his makeup, practicing with the same care and focus he gave to his professional tasks. He never told many people about this. It was something he found comfortable and pleasing within his own home. As he rummaged through his wardrobe that morning, he pulled out a white blouse with short sleeves and soft lace trim. Then he slipped into a knee-length green skirt that he felt added a bit of brightness to his day. Sipping his first cup of coffee, he walked around his living room, taking in how calm everything felt. The plush sofa, the small television set in the corner, and the bookcase stacked with novels he had collected over the years all made the space feel like a personal retreat. The curtains were drawn back, letting in the mild sunlight that illuminated specks of dust dancing in the air. This was his favorite time of day, that short window when the sun was bright but not scorching, and he could relax without responsibilities lurking over him. He wandered into the kitchen and opened the fridge. There was some leftover pasta from the previous night, a few eggs, half a carton of milk, and a couple of fresh vegetables. He set the pasta aside, thinking he might have it for lunch, and decided to quickly whip up some scrambled eggs. While letting the eggs cook, he leaned back against the counter, absent-mindedly swaying in his skirt and humming a tune that had been stuck in his head. This was when he heard the washer in the adjoining laundry room make an odd sound, some clanking noise followed by a sputter. He frowned. The washing machine was finishing up a cycle of laundry he had started earlier that morning. He believed the noise was normal at first, or perhaps a shirt button trapped against the drum, but a louder grinding sound followed, and he realized something was definitely off. "Really? Today of all days?" he muttered. The soft beep of the washer's error signal interrupted the quiet, and the machine abruptly stopped. Carl walked over and saw it was filled with water that hadn't drained. A few shirts and a pair of jeans were partially submerged. The display read an error code he didn't recognize. He sighed and straightened the lace collar of his blouse, as though that might somehow steady his thoughts. The broken washer was the last thing he wanted to deal with. He bent over, pressed a few buttons, and reset the cycle to see if it would come back to life. Nothing happened. His reflection in the glossy metal of the appliance's front panel showed the slight smudges of foundation he had applied to his face earlier that day, along with the quiet panic in his eyes. The machine was utterly unresponsive. He decided to call the nearest appliance repair service. Under normal circumstances, he might have taken a moment to change clothes, maybe wash off his makeup, and present as he usually did. But for some reason, maybe out of sheer annoyance at the sudden malfunction, he didn't even think about it. He grabbed his phone, found the number of a repair company with decent online reviews, and dialed. The phone rang a few times, and a woman answered. Carl explained the problem. "It just stopped mid-cycle," he said. "There's water inside that hasn't drained, and the display is showing an error code I've never seen before." "No problem," the woman on the line replied politely. "We'll send someone out as soon as they're available. It's actually not too busy today, so he might be there within the next hour or so. Is that okay?" Carl was so relieved to hear they could come quickly that he blurted out his answer without hesitation. "Yes, that's perfect," he said. "Thanks so much. I'm at home all day." He hung up, realizing only after that brief phone call that he was still standing in his kitchen wearing his favorite blouse and skirt, with well-applied mascara, eyeliner, and a layer of foundation that evened his complexion. For a split second, he considered rushing upstairs to change into his usual clothes, but the knowledge that the repair person might arrive soon left him hesitant. He estimated he still had a window to change and tidy up, yet there was a tiny voice in his head urging him to stay dressed as he was, if only because he'd been looking forward to a rare day of comfort. He glanced at the clock above the stove. It was 10:15 in the morning, and the repair service had said the technician could be there within the hour. "I have time," he told himself, but he felt this strange tug of defiance. After all, he was in his own home, and wearing these clothes felt perfectly natural to him. Still mulling over whether to change, he decided to finish cooking his scrambled eggs and took them off the stove just before they could overcook. Grabbing a plate, he set the table in his small dining area, took a seat, and momentarily forgot his worries as he ate. The eggs were light and fluffy, and he found himself savoring each bite, every so often resting his elbow on the table and brushing a stray bit of hair away from his forehead. His plan had been to do a deep clean of the house, enjoy his day, and maybe watch a movie later. The broken washer was an obstacle, but at least the repair was on its way. Taking advantage of the short time he thought he had, he carried his plate to the sink and began rinsing it. He then wandered around his living room, adjusting pillows, wiping dust from the coffee table, and eventually making his way upstairs to the bedroom to quickly straighten the rumpled bedding. There, on his bedside table, lay a small, compact mirror. He picked it up and checked his face. His eyeliner was still neat, and the nude lipstick he had chosen wasn't smudged. A sudden knock on the door made him freeze. He stared at the mirror for a long moment before placing it down and heading to the window. Pulling back the curtain, he saw a white van parked in his driveway. The words, "Swift Fix Appliance Repair," were printed on the side. He felt his chest tighten as he realized that the repair service had arrived far sooner than he had expected. He hurried downstairs, hearing another firm knock. In that frantic moment, he considered slipping out of his clothes and throwing on a t-shirt and jeans. But the person at the door might knock again, or even attempt to phone him, and he didn't want to leave anyone waiting outside in the cold. So he took a steadying breath, walked to the front door, and opened it. Standing there was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s, wearing a navy blue uniform and holding a small toolbox. His hair was trimmed close, and he had a short beard flecked with hints of gray. At the very moment Carl opened the door, the man looked up from a clipboard in his hand, and for the briefest second, the professional smile on his face turned into a look of mild surprise. Carl realized what must be going through the man's head. Carl was wearing his full outfit, blouse, skirt, and the makeup that certainly did not disguise his facial features enough to pass as someone else entirely. The repairman's eyes flicked downward, then met Carl's gaze again in that tiny flash of recognition. There was a pause, that fraction of a heartbeat where both of them registered the situation. But the repairman recovered his composure almost instantly. "Morning, ma'am," he said, his professional tone unwavering. "I'm here to look at the washer. You called about an error code?" Carl managed a nod, but his face felt warm. Hearing "ma'am" directed at him felt both awkward and strangely affirming. He cleared his throat in an attempt to respond in a slightly higher pitch than his natural voice, but habit took over. "Yes," he said, his usual voice coming through before he could correct it. He tried to rein it in a second later, but it was too late. "It stopped mid-cycle," he continued, an uncertain waver in his words. "Water inside and everything." The repairman didn't flinch, but Carl sensed the tension in the air. "Right," the man said. He introduced himself as Tom. "If you don't mind, I'll take a quick look at the machine. Could you show me where it is?" Carl stood back and gestured inside. "Sure, it's right through there," he said, forcing a smile. He felt his heart racing as he led Tom into the laundry room. The hallway leading there was narrow, lined with framed photos of the house from the day Carl bought it. Carl could feel the slight swish of his skirt against his thighs with every step he took. The sensation, normally enjoyable, now made him hyper-aware of how he was dressed. Once inside the laundry room, Tom set his toolbox on the floor. "Let's see what we're working with," he said, kneeling in front of the washing machine. He pressed a few buttons, squinted at the display, and quietly noted the error code to himself. Carl stood a few feet behind, arms folded, uncertain about what to say or how to act. He wanted to appear casual, but it was difficult to be relaxed when his cheeks were still burning. Trying to break the silence, Carl asked, "So, does that code ring a bell?" Again, he noticed his own voice sounded more like his normal register now. He felt a faint wave of embarrassment, but it was better to keep talking than to let the tension heighten. Tom nodded. "I've seen it a few times before," he replied. "It can be a drainage issue or a problem with the motor. I'll open the back and check the hoses. Could be something clogging the pump, or it could be a more complicated electrical issue." Carl nodded, not wanting to appear clueless, though he knew almost nothing about washer repairs. "Okay, sure, do whatever you need," he said, stepping back further to give Tom room. Tom opened his toolbox, retrieved a screwdriver and a small flashlight, and set to work. An awkward silence settled in the room as Tom unscrewed the back panel of the washer. Carl stood by the doorway, arms at his sides now, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He tried to calm the fluttering in his stomach, reminding himself that this was purely a professional visit. The most normal thing to do would be to leave Tom to his work, maybe wait in the living room, and offer coffee if necessary. But anxiety kept him rooted to the spot. After a few minutes of tinkering, Tom spoke again. "You said it just stopped mid-cycle, right?" He was peering behind the machine, shining the flashlight around. Carl stepped closer and tried not to trip over his own feet. "Yeah, it made some weird clanking noises. Then it beeped and just wouldn't restart." Tom reached inside the machine to feel for any blockages. "All right, I see some water in here that hasn't drained. Let me get a bucket or something to collect this water, or else it'll be all over your floor." Carl pointed to a small plastic bin in the corner of the room, his voice again coming out in that midpoint between a careful pitch and his normal deeper tone. "You can use that. Let me know if you need some towels." Tom nodded his thanks. He maneuvered the bin under the drain hose and allowed some of the water to trickle out. The soft sound of splashing water filled the room, momentarily breaking the quiet. Carl tried not to stare at the repairman too obviously, but he couldn't help noticing the man's concentration and precise movements. It was comforting, in a strange way, to see a professional so focused on the task, while Carl stood there trying to maintain an air of normalcy in clothes he typically wore only for personal relaxation. A few minutes later, Tom twisted around, glancing briefly at Carl, and said, "This might take a bit. I have to unscrew a panel on the side to check the pump itself. Feel free to go about your day if you don't want to stand here. I'll give you an update if I find anything major." "Oh, of course," Carl said, forcing a polite smile. "If you need water or anything to drink, just ask. I'll be in the living room." He left the room and headed into the main part of the house, taking a seat on the couch. He exhaled a long breath, noticing how tense his shoulders felt. He turned on the television, hoping to distract himself with some daytime program, but found he couldn't focus. The voices on the screen were just background noise to the thoughts tumbling in his head. What was Tom thinking? Was he simply one of those professionals who had seen it all and wouldn't bat an eyelash at a client's personal choices? Or was he quietly judging Carl, waiting to leave so he could share a strange story about the man in a skirt? Carl told himself it didn't matter. This was his home, and he was an adult with every right to dress as he pleased. Yet his nerves refused to settle. He felt a swirl of relief and embarrassment in equal measure, but it was too late to do anything now. Tom had already seen him this way. Trying to distract himself, Carl reached for a book he had left on the coffee table. It was a mystery novel he'd been meaning to finish. He flipped to the last chapter he read, but still his attention drifted to the faint clanking sounds coming from the laundry room. Finally, he closed the book and let it rest on his lap, occasionally looking down at the skirt's material draping over his legs. The bright green color offered at least a bit of cheerfulness. Almost 20 minutes passed before Tom appeared in the doorway. He stood there, wiping his hands on a rag. "I think I found part of the problem," Tom said, his voice steady. "There's some clogging in the pump, coins, bits of debris, and it looks like the motor might have overheated slightly. I can replace the pump, but I might need a new part for the motor if it's too damaged." "Oh," Carl said, standing up. He clasped his hands in front of him to keep them from fidgeting. "How long does that usually take?" Tom shrugged. "If the motor's shot, I might have to order one. Could be a couple of days unless we get lucky, and I have the right model in the van. But let me test it first. The best case scenario is that once we clear the pump, it'll run, and the motor won't need replacing. The blockages sometimes cause the motor to strain." "All right," Carl replied. He tried not to show too much anxiety about possibly losing the use of his washer for a few days. He thought about how he might have to haul his laundry to a laundromat, a scenario he didn't exactly relish. "I appreciate you checking." Tom gave a curt nod, his expression polite but unreadable. He paused, seeming to weigh whether to say something more. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I could use a glass of water, if you don't mind. Been kind of a hectic morning." Carl's eyes lit up at the opportunity to be a good host. "Absolutely," he said. "I'll grab some right now. The kitchen is just around the corner." He walked ahead, aware of Tom's heavy boots following him. Reaching the kitchen, Carl took a tall glass from the cupboard and filled it with cool tap water. He handed it to Tom, who thanked him quietly and took a few gulps. For a moment, they stood there in the kitchen, not quite making eye contact. The overhead light made the space seem smaller somehow, intensifying the awareness each had of the other. "So," Tom said, exhaling after a sip of water. "I'll get back to the pump. Shouldn't be too long." Carl nodded. "Sure. If you need anything else, just let me know." Tom returned to the laundry room, leaving Carl alone again in the kitchen. Carl placed a hand against his cheek. It still felt warm. He wandered back into the living room, turned off the TV, and decided maybe some fresh air would clear his head. But the prospect of stepping outside, dressed as he was, made him hesitate. He peered out the window, noticed neighbors going about their day, and quickly decided against it. Instead, he walked to the sliding glass door that led to a small patio and opened it just enough to let in a gentle breeze. He took a seat on a simple wooden chair near the doorway, letting the breeze wash over him. The feeling of the air against his legs reminded him how comfortable and airy a skirt could be. He appreciated the moment, inhaling slowly, hoping to steady his nerves. He then heard the clang of a tool dropping in the laundry room. "All good?" Tom called, his voice carrying through the hallway. Carl forced a small smile at the man's reassurance. At least he seemed to be carefully managing everything, though it was impossible to guess what Tom was thinking. A short while later, Tom emerged again with an update. He explained that the clog was more significant than he had hoped. He wanted to test the washer to see if the motor was salvageable. "If it's okay," Tom said, looking at Carl, "I'd like to run a short cycle with water to make sure everything drains properly. It might get a bit loud." Carl nodded. "Of course," he said. "Go ahead. I'll listen for it if something sounds off." Sure, Tom replied. He hesitated for a second, then continued. These washers can be finicky, but hopefully we can get it sorted without replacing the entire motor. It'll save you money and time. Carl appreciated the man's professionalism. Thanks, Tom, he said, forgetting to adjust his tone again. He took a step backward, glancing at a small mirror hanging on the living room wall. He could see the faint color of his lipstick, still intact. The incongruity of the moment, standing in full makeup and a skirt, conversing with a burly repairman, made him both anxious and strangely amused. He waited near the laundry room doorway while Tom started the washer. The machine whirred for a moment, then began to fill. Carl tensed, wondering if it would throw the error code again, but it seemed to proceed normally. After a few minutes, the water drained with a low gurgle. Tom crouched, shining his flashlight to check for leaks or unusual sounds. A few more cycles of water in and out, and Tom finally stood up. Looks like it's working now, he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. The motor doesn't sound like it's grinding. It probably overheated earlier because of the clog. He turned to face Carl. You got lucky. It's a good thing you called quickly, or that motor might have ended up burning out. Carl blinked, relief flooding him. Oh, wow, that's great news, he said, flashing a genuine smile. I can't thank you enough. Just doing my job, Tom replied, but there was a friendliness in his expression that wasn't there before. He took a moment to gather his tools. I'll write up the invoice and details. You'll have a 1-year warranty on the new pump. Sure, Carl agreed. Would you like to sit down at the dining table to do that? Tom nodded. Yeah, that might be easier. They both walked to the kitchen table. Tom set his clipboard down, rifling through a few papers. As he wrote up the details, Carl stood awkwardly at the edge of the table, hands folded together. He briefly considered offering Tom something else to drink or a snack, but the tension in his own mind made it hard to speak. Finally, Tom looked up and cleared his throat. All right, so the pump replacement is this amount here, he said, pointing to a line on the invoice. Labor is here. Tax, plus the house call fee. The total is at the bottom. Carl leaned over, noticing Tom glancing at him from under lowered lashes. He tried to steady his voice. That seems fair, he said. He reached for his wallet on the counter and pulled out a credit card. He handed it to Tom, who processed it using a small handheld device he had brought. The device took a few seconds to connect. There was an uncomfortable lull in the conversation as they both waited for the transaction to go through. Once the payment cleared, Tom handed Carl a receipt. That should do it, he said. He gathered his tools and headed toward the front door, Carl trailing him. I guess that solves your laundry crisis, Tom added, giving a faint, polite smile. Carl let out a soft, nervous laugh. I appreciate you coming out so fast. I honestly didn't expect anyone to arrive before noon. Tom shrugged, stepping onto the threshold. Some days our schedule just works out like that. I was in the area. He paused, met Carl's eyes briefly, then gave a courteous nod. Well, you take care. If anything else comes up, you know who to call. Carl swallowed the lump in his throat. Right. Thanks again, Tom. Have a good day. Tom nodded, turned, and walked to his van. As he climbed in, he glanced back once, though Carl couldn't read the look on his face. Then the van backed out of the driveway, and Carl stood there at the open door, listening to the engine fade into the distance. Only when the van had disappeared down the street did he close the door and lean against it, exhaling a breath he felt like he'd been holding for the past hour. His mind raced, replaying every moment of awkwardness. He winced at how many times he had spoken in his normal voice. But then again, he reasoned, maybe it was silly to be so worked up about it. After all, Tom had been courteous and professional. He hadn't even asked any prying questions or made any rude comments. Perhaps he had clocked Carl right away, or maybe he hadn't cared at all. Carl's cheeks still felt slightly warm from the tension, yet a shaky relief spread through him. Everything had turned out much better than the doomsday scenarios in his head. He decided he needed something to calm the last frayed edges of his nerves. He walked back into the kitchen, poured himself a fresh glass of water, and downed half of it in one go. The silence in the house now felt like a balm, soothing him after the rush of anxiety. He took a seat at the dining table and stared down at the itemized receipt. The labor cost stung a bit, but the knowledge that his washing machine was fixed offered reassurance. Setting the receipt aside, he folded his hands and simply sat for a few moments, gazing at the calm reflection in the table's glossy surface. With Tom gone, Carl felt both the relief of returning to his private sanctuary and the unsettled feeling left by the entire encounter. He looked down at his outfit. The day was still his, and he reminded himself that his original plan had been to relax. Maybe watch a movie, maybe read, maybe do something else that would help him enjoy his day off to the fullest. He stood up, smoothed his skirt, and walked to the laundry room. The machine was sitting quietly, with no signs of trouble, so he decided to properly finish that load of laundry. Pressing the start button, he listened as the machine hummed to life. The water began filling again, reassuring him that all was finally well. As the cycle ran, he returned to the living room and spent some time dusting and tidying. He wanted to get rid of the anxious energy that still lingered from Tom's visit. Eventually, he realized that the tension was fading. The embarrassment of being seen by the repairman in his chosen attire was giving way to a sense of calm. The day was still ahead of him, and he was determined to enjoy it. He prepared a light lunch, a simple salad with leftover chicken, drizzled with a tangy dressing. He ate it slowly at the table, letting the taste distract him from overthinking. After lunch, he decided to settle on the couch and watch something lighthearted. Flipping through a streaming service, he found a romantic comedy that seemed harmless enough. As it played, he allowed himself to be pulled into the story, occasionally letting out small laughs at the silly humor. The hours slid by. Mid-afternoon sunlight cast warm beams across the living room, and Carl drifted in and out of paying attention to the plot. He realized that, despite everything, he was still dressed comfortably in the outfit he had chosen that morning, still enjoying the way the skirt felt whenever he shifted positions on the couch. The tension that had surged earlier with Tom's arrival had become a memory, a slightly embarrassing but also oddly freeing experience. He considered that maybe, in an unexpected way, this had been an important reminder that he could handle these situations more calmly than he'd once believed. By late afternoon, the washing machine beeped, signaling that the cycle had finished. He paused the movie to transfer his clothes from the washer to the dryer. There was something oddly symbolic about it. The machine was working again, the water had drained, and now all that remained was to finish the chore. He pressed the start button on the dryer and listened to the comforting sound of tumbling clothes. He resumed the rest of his afternoon by reorganizing some clutter in the house, wiping down the counters and sweeping the floors. The rhythmic tasks helped to ground him, and it felt good to see the house in better shape than it had been that morning. By the time he finished, he decided to treat himself to a light dinner. He wanted to cook something that required a bit more effort, so he rummaged around the kitchen until he found the ingredients for a simple stir-fry: chicken, mixed vegetables, soy sauce, and some other spices. He sautéed everything, filling the house with a warm, savory aroma. As the skillet hissed, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the microwave's door. Lipstick still faintly visible, eyeliner only slightly smudged after the day. He felt a flash of that earlier anxiety, recalling Tom's initial double-take. But he also felt strangely proud that he had carried on, not letting the moment crush him. Sitting down to eat, he took a bite and savored the flavors. He pulled his phone closer and scrolled through notifications. A few messages from friends popped up, mostly casual remarks or group chat banter. He found himself smiling, replying where needed, but not feeling any urge to share the day's peculiar story. It was his personal life, something he rarely discussed with anyone beyond a very small circle of confidants. He cleaned the dishes, humming quietly to himself, and then decided to settle in for a quiet evening. Stepping into the bathroom, he finally removed his makeup, carefully washing his face with a gentle cleanser and rinsing away the traces of foundation, eyeshadow, eyeliner, and lipstick. He patted his cheeks dry, caught sight of himself in the mirror, and gave a small smile. He still wore the skirt and blouse, and he realized that he was in no rush to change out of them. He pulled a comb through his hair, smoothing it, then switched off the bathroom light. Entering his bedroom, he turned on the bedside lamp and looked around. The bed was neatly made. The space was tidier than usual. He felt a gentle weariness settle over him. It had been an emotionally charged day, yet also a strangely ordinary one, marked by a broken machine, a service call, a moment of quiet tension, and the normal routines of everyday life. Before getting too comfortable, he walked downstairs one last time to check on the laundry. He found that the dryer cycle had finished, and he opened the door, feeling a wave of warm air rush out. He pulled out the clothes and set them in a basket, then folded them systematically at the dining table. There was a sense of completion in that simple act, as if the day's troubles had been folded and put away, along with the clean shirts and jeans. Returning upstairs, he set the folded clothes on a chair for later. A glance at the clock told him it was not too late, but the soft glow of the lamp and the calm that had fallen over the house made him want to rest early. He changed into more comfortable sleepwear, still a simple nightgown that he occasionally wore, and slipped under the covers of his bed. Staring at the ceiling, he thought about everything that had happened. In truth, the entire experience with Tom reminded him of how unpredictable life could be. He had been so sure he would have time to change before the repairman arrived, or that the repair would take longer, or that the repairman might react differently. Yet none of his assumptions had played out exactly as expected. Instead, Tom had shown up quickly, witnessed Carl in full feminine attire, and carried on as though it hardly mattered. There had been tension, but no hostility or confrontation. He flicked off the lamp, letting darkness envelop him. As he lay there, he thought he might have some trouble falling asleep with so many reflections on the day swirling in his head. But he felt surprisingly at peace, his body and mind settling into rest more smoothly than he anticipated. For a few minutes, he listened to the soft ticking of a clock on the nightstand, letting its rhythm lull him. Sleep came, and the next morning arrived in a gentle wash of early light through his window. Carl stirred, feeling the cool sheets against his legs. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and took a moment to recall the events of the previous day. It almost felt like a dream, calling a repairman while dressed in his skirt and blouse, the confusion and awkwardness, Tom's professionalism, and then the relief of having everything resolved. He got out of bed and made his way to the bathroom, where he carried out his usual morning routine. After washing up, he dressed in casual clothes, this time just simple jeans and a t-shirt, as he was planning to head out for groceries later. He went downstairs, boiled water for tea, and checked his phone for any missed calls or messages. Nothing urgent. He sipped his tea while looking at the quiet living room. The memory of Tom standing there, writing the invoice, flashed across his mind. He almost laughed at himself for how worried he'd been. He glanced toward the laundry room, half expecting some new issue, but all was quiet, and he reminded himself that Tom's repairs should hold. Setting his mug on the coffee table, he gathered the laundry basket he had folded last night and started putting the clean clothes away. As he placed each garment in its rightful drawer or closet space, he realized that an entire day had passed since the awkward incident, and his life felt as normal as ever. The bright green skirt he had worn yesterday was now neatly hung, the white blouse folded in a drawer. It made him smile a little, remembering just how comfortable he had felt before everything turned chaotic with the washing machine's malfunction. An hour later, he was in his car, heading to the local grocery store to restock his fridge. He drove with the window partly down, letting the cool breeze in. Passing the neighborhood houses, he saw people watering gardens, walking dogs, or simply enjoying the clear weather. No one gave him a second look, and he found comfort in the mundane scene. At the grocery store, he grabbed a cart and strolled through the aisles, picking out produce, snacks, and some items he needed for future meals. He thought about what he might make for dinner in the upcoming days, selecting fresh vegetables and a few proteins. The store's easy pace, the background hum of chatter, and the overhead music helped him relax further. By the time he returned home, he was balancing grocery bags on each arm, using a free finger to unlock the door. He headed into the kitchen, placing the bags on the counter. As he began unpacking, his mind drifted back to the events of the previous day. It seemed so distant already, yet he knew he'd carry the memory for a long time. A sense of reassurance spread through him at the thought that, despite all the awkwardness, life had moved on and everything remained intact. He spent the rest of the morning tidying up the groceries, checking work emails, and preparing a lunch of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. It wasn't until he was seated at the kitchen table with a warm bowl of soup in front of him that he realized he'd made it through the entire morning without feeling any of the knots that had formed in his stomach the day before. After lunch, he decided to take a short walk around the block. The sky was bright, and birds hopped across lawns searching for seeds. He exchanged the occasional wave or nod with neighbors, but kept the walk brief, returning home to continue enjoying his day in solitude. In the back of his mind, he still mulled over whether to share the story of the repairman with a close friend, but somehow he preferred to keep it to himself for now. The day progressed, with Carl alternating between light chores and moments of relaxation. By late afternoon, he found himself in the laundry room once more, checking the machine, almost as if to confirm it still worked perfectly. He ran a quick cycle with a few towels that needed refreshing. The machine hummed away, draining water smoothly and spinning the towels without any sign of trouble. He smiled to himself, grateful for Tom's repair. Evening came. He boiled pasta, tossed it in a sauce of garlic, olive oil, and chili flakes, then ate quietly while thinking about what movie he might stream later. The hum of the refrigerator and the gentle clink of his fork against the plate were the only sounds in the kitchen. A faint glow of satisfaction lingered from the realization that not every unexpected moment in life had to end in disaster. Sometimes it just ended in a fixed washing machine, a paid invoice, and a day that continued as usual. He finished his dinner and placed the dishes in the sink. Then he turned off the kitchen light and moved into the living room, where he dropped into a comfortable seat on the couch. The remote sat on the coffee table, and he picked it up, scrolling through his streaming options. A quiet voice in the back of his mind reminded him of how fleeting these quiet moments could be, how important it was to savor them when they appeared. Carl chose a light comedy he hadn't seen before. The opening scenes drew him in. The comedic timing of the lead actor made him laugh aloud a couple of times, easing the last remnants of the day's minor stresses. Now and again, his mind replayed images of Tom, standing solidly with his toolbox, calmly addressing him as ma'am, and then continuing as if everything were normal. It was a gentle nudge that the world was a wide place, filled with people who had their own tasks to complete, and that maybe, just maybe, his choices weren't as monumental to others as they were to him. The evening wore on, and the comedy's credits finally rolled. A comfortable heaviness settled over Carl. He decided to prepare for bed. He made one last pass through the house, checking that the windows were locked and the lights switched off. In the bedroom, he took a moment to reflect on the day's simplicity and the previous day's commotion. Then he changed into a soft t-shirt he often wore for sleep, climbed under the covers, and switched off the lamp. In that final quiet moment before slumber, he thought about how a single hour of awkwardness with a stranger had felt so overwhelming, and yet here he was, safe, relaxed, and none the worse for wear. He had learned something about himself, though he couldn't quite put it into words. He only knew that he felt calmer, certain that tomorrow and the day after, he would keep living the way he wanted in his own home, wearing whatever felt right when the moment struck. The thought brought him a sense of calm that lulled him deeper into rest. He closed his eyes, drifting away with no particular worries tugging at him. Tomorrow, he'd go back to his day job, juggling responsibilities and answering emails. The memory of Tom's surprised yet contained look might still spark a moment of tension if it crossed his mind, but it wouldn't define him. The machine was fixed, and so was the laundry crisis. The day off, despite its unexpected twist, had ended as a gentle reminder that life carried on. The house settled into quiet darkness, punctuated only by the soft clicks and hums of the appliances that Carl had come to rely on. In one corner, the washing machine stood silent and fully operational, a testament to how quickly problems can come and go. Carl slept soundly, his thoughts drifting through pleasant dreams, at peace in the private sanctuary he called home.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.